One of the ex-PMC Wagner members just came back from the so-called Donetsk People's Republic after serving for Prigozhin, and here he got into a fight with the local police enforcement. After he was arrested, police found about 500 bullets in his suitcase. This case is the least harmless among hundreds and hundreds of new crimes committed by those soldiers who come back from the war against Ukraine. Soldiers come back from the war. They suffer from PTSD, they start to drink, they start to use drugs, and eventually they commit a lot of new crimes. Moreover, ex-prisoners who were hired from the prisons by PMC Wagner, by Prigozhin, they get amnestied and they get the freedom and start to commit crimes again. Soldiers show off with their honors and eventually get in a lot of conflicts in bars and restaurants. By the way, my name is Zach, I'm 22 years old Russian who left Russia because of the war against Ukraine, and in this video I will tell you about how many crimes were committed by soldiers who came back from the front, and of course by the ex-prisoners hired by PMC Wagner. As we know, Prigozhin, from 26th of June 2022 all the way to February 1st, 2023, he hired about 50,000 of prisoners from all over Russia. Later, Ministry of Defense prohibited PMC Wagner to hire prisoners from the prisons, and eventually Ministry of Defense started to do it themselves. And as we know, they hired about 20,000 of prisoners. So 50,000 of prisoners from PMC Wagner and 20,000 of prisoners from Ministry of Defense. Together, that's about 70,000 of prisoners who were hired from prisons to fight against Ukraine and eventually to get freedom in exchange. Those who were hired were supposed to serve their sentence in jails for at least like 10, 15, 20 years. But by sending those prisoners to the war, Russia is kind of getting two birds with one stone. Firstly, they lower the amount of prisoners in jails, and eventually they don't have to spend so much money on covering their basic needs. And secondly, they are solving the question with mobilization. Because as we saw, not many people were volunteering to go and to serve for Putin's ambitions in Ukraine. And that's why they hired about 70,000 people from prisons. However, nobody thought about the consequences of this decision. But those heroes are coming back to their homes right now, and they are getting to what they used to do, killing other people and committing crimes. Prigozhin said, as of June 18th, 2023, 32,000 persons from among those previously convicted and who took part in a special military operation on the territory of Luhansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic in the ranks of the Wagner's PMCs went home at the end of the contract. However, organization Russia Behind the Bars and its head Olga Romanova says that this number is impossible because about 60 or 70% are dying in Ukraine and not coming back to Russia. So she is saying that only 20,000 of ex-prisoners came back home. From different regions of Russia, we hear about many different conflicts and crimes committed by those Wagner PMC members who came back home. As of today, at least 27 people were killed by the soldiers who came back from the war against Ukraine, and at least 19 of those were committed by the ex-prisoners from PMC Wagner. Here we even have a graphic by all the murders committed since the start of the war against Ukraine. Earlier, Vladimir Putin was saying that there is nothing destructive in the practice of sending the prisoners to the war against Ukraine. I want to say that we are all people, everyone can make some mistakes. They once made them, but they gave their lives for the motherland and redeemed their guilt in full. And now let's see what actual crimes did those ex-prisoners committed and if Vladimir Putin was right about this practice being okay. One of the most resonant crimes of this year is the murder of an 85-year-old woman in the town of Vyatka Polyana, Kyiv region, committed on March 29th, allegedly by the PMC Wagner member Ivan Rosomachin. A couple of days before, he was already walking around the village drunk.
Ванька идет, говорит, вовсю орет. В одной руке, говорит, пиво, во второй, говорит, я не помню, говорит, не знаю, говорит, пакет, не знаю, что. Во второй руке у него вилы. Вилы, топор, нож. И идет, орет. Убью всех, перережу всю семью. Орет.
Вы опасаетесь то, что...
Очень. Мы ночи не спим.
The administration of the city said that they would simply expel him from the village because he was a danger, but they did not expel. As a result, after a short period of time, Ivan Rosomachin broke the windows of 2 cars and then got to an apartment of an 85-year-old grandmother and cut her down with an axe. However, Ivan Rosomachin was not supposed to be there freely walking drunk with an axe and threatening everyone in his village. He was supposed to be in jail. 2.5 years before that happened, he was sentenced to 14 years in jail for committing a felony, and to be precise, he killed during a robbery. But eventually, he got hired by PMC Wagner, and he served only for about half a year, got released, got amnestied, became a hero of Russia, came back to his village, and killed a poor 85 years old babushka. The day before, in the village of Yermakovskaya in Krasnoyarsk territory, the police detained a former mercenary of Wagner PMC, Denis Stepanov, on suspicion of double murder. According to the investigation, he deliberately set the fire to the house where the mother and daughter were. One woman was 68 years old, the other was 35. In 2021, Stepanov was sentenced to 3.5 years in a penal colony for beating an acquaintance. And of course, after serving for about half a year for Wagner PMC, he got free and eventually came back and committed this crime. In Lipetsk, a 31 years old ex-PMC Wagner member was detained, suspected of murdering a 4 years old stepdaughter. During the conflict with his wife, he hit her daughter from her first marriage several times on the head. The girl died before the ambulance arrived. Another case of a 55 years old Oleg who returned to the Volzhye of the Nizhny Novgorod region, and during the conflict he set his sister on fire alive. In March 2022, he was already serving an 11-year sentence in a penal colony for murder, but then he was recruited into the PMCs and amnestied, and a year later he was released. Tseren Dorji Tserenjapov, convicted of dismemberment murder of an 18-year-old girl in Chita for 14 years, was released only after 4 years after serving in PMC Wagner, and he is again suspected of murder in Ugdan. Previously convicted Maxim Bachkaryov and Igor Safonov, the second one recently returned from Ukraine where he ended up being hired from the prison as part of the PMC Wagner. On the night of August 1st, 2023, 6 people were killed there, and on August 4th, the police found the body of a 7th resident. The 6 victims were stabbed to death, and their houses were set on fire. In the Krasnodar region, 2 actors for children's celebrations were killed. Among the suspects is a former prisoner who was released thanks to the Wagner PMC. According to the investigation, on the night of April 28th, the suspect saw a car on the road with 2 actors inside. The Investigate Committee's press service writes that the suspects then decided to rob them of their money and of their valuables and to kill the actors. They forced 2 of the actors to withdraw over 180,000 rubles from different ATMs and then killed them, buried their bodies and burned the car. In the village of Morzakova in Chuvasha, a 23 years old ex-mercenary from the Wagner PMC, Nikita Lyubimov, was arrested for killing a fellow villager upon his return from the war in Ukraine. Lyubimov had been recruited in prison where he was serving sentence for 5 crimes, including robbery and assault. According to the investigation, on the evening of May 27th, while under the influence of alcohol, Lyubimov attacked a 55 years old Igor Pushkin, the victim, with multiple blows to the head, torso and other parts of the body due to personal animosity. The man died on the spot from the injuries sustained. Local residents say that upon his return, Lyubimov terrorized the entire village, starting drunken fights, threatening everyone including women who were afraid to let their children go out without adult supervision because of him. However, nothing could be done to him as he returned from the war as a hero. Another case of a 44 years old Alexander Mamayev from Nizhny Novgorod who went to war with Ukraine as a volunteer and served there as a deputy platoon commander. He returned in the middle of April, and on April 17th, together with his wife Ekaterina and her brother, they decided to celebrate the reunion. They had been drinking heavily for about 4 days. During their party, Mamayev fell asleep and woke up. According to his words, feeling that his wife was reaching to his pocket where the money was. A quarrel began, during which Ekaterina allegedly hit her husband, and he in return grabbed a knife and inflicted a wound to her chest. She died, and he was sent back to jail. So there are 2 children were left, and they were sent to an orphanage. Another case which happened on May 9th, a conflict occurred near a bar in St. Petersburg involving a 33 years old man whose name is unfortunately unknown. He stabbed a 25 years old young guy in the neck, resulting in his death. The killer claimed that he has participated in the war in Ukraine and stated that he had nothing to lose. On July 31st in Vladimir, soldier volunteer Alexei Demyshenko, who had left the front for treatment, attacked a visitor of a local bar with a knife. The victim, 45 years old Alexei, died on the spot. On Wednesday, the court sentenced Timoshenko to pretrial detention. A former Wagner soldier on the Volgograd raped a 13-year-old girl. Alexei Khlebnikov returned to his native village this summer, and now he is wanted on suspicion of raping a 13-year-old girl. Previously, Khlebnikov was convicted of murder and a car theft. The last time he was sentenced to 11 years in prison, however, he enlisted in the Wagner PMC and got amnestied. Not only the veterans, the soldiers of the war against Ukraine, suffer from PTSD, but they also suffer from a huge drug addiction. They get addicted to drugs on the front line because it helps to reduce the stress level. The main addiction is to amphetamine because it's relatively cheap, it's easy to create, it's like a synthetic drug, and also it keeps you active and focused, and just in general keeps you in a good mood, and I guess soldiers need that while being in the front and fighting the war, which they understand is not right. As doctors say that every second patient they have in their hospitals who return from the war is a drug addict. One of the doctors from one of the hospitals in the city of Kemerovo said, "Now, to the civilian patients have been added also the participants of the special military operation. And of course, assistance should be provided to them in priority, so you can imagine, things have become even worse for ordinary grandmothers and grandfathers and other peaceful residents. These people number in the thousands, those who have returned from the war. They have learned to kill. Their psyche has been altered, including by drugs. Moreover, many of them went to the war not to defend their homeland, but to get out of the prison or correctional colonies earlier. So it was already difficult to call them angels before, and now, for the most part, they are the beasts. I apologize for the bluntness, but just imagine what Kuzbas is like nowadays. It is a collection of many small towns, including coal mining towns. There is hardly any education, healthcare, or employment here, unless you go into the mines. Everyone who can tries to leave the region as quickly as possible and take their children with them. The people are angry, half have served the time, the other half will serve, as they say. And now, those also return from the war. It's like being in some cheap zombie apocalypse movie, where it's terrifying for a normal person to find themselves. And of course, the government doesn't want the ordinary Russians to know that the ex-prisoners, the ex-killers, criminals, come back and start to live in the civilian society again. Olga Romanova from Russia Behind the Bars organization claims that about 20,000 of ex-prisoners have returned home. One of the journalists asked Olga Romanova if she thinks that's a big number that's going to affect overall the crime level in Russia. And she said, "This has already had an impact. We just don't see it and we will not see it because we have a law of discrediting volunteers and that's it. So when the police have the opportunity not to record crimes committed by volunteers who participated in the war, they don't record them. The information about amnestied prisoners just disappears from the court documents. The whole procedure of being amnestied is absolutely violated. So the only person in Russia can amnesty people, and that's the president. But there should be some conditions implemented. Firstly, the victims of the crimes that the person committed should agree to amnesty this person. And secondly, there should be a public discussions about it in the local communities of the city or village of a region where the person who committed a crime from. But in reality, it is just Putin who amnesties everyone and doesn't ask for the victims of the crimes or for local communities. And what's more important, they are trying to hide it so the ordinary Russians will not be angry. And it's crazy how they treat those ex-soldiers who killed Ukrainians and they came back to Russia and became heroes, because here in Khanty-Mansiysk recently they allowed 5 out of 6 applying ex-prisoners who served in the PMC Wagner to actually be teachers in schools and teach something. I don't know what they're gonna teach, like PE class maybe? Labor class? We have this kind of class where you build a stool out of wood. What are they gonna teach? And like the most important thing, they're gonna teach things to children. They're gonna spend time with children. Ex-prisoners who committed crimes, really heavy crimes like killings. Ex-prisoners who fought in the war and got such a severe PTSD, those people are gonna be working with children in Khanty-Mansiysk. That's crazy. Olga Romanova from the organization Behind the Bars also added, "Now there is a widespread police practice that has gained popularity. When police are called for a disturbance, noise, domestic violence, or something like that, and the police arrives, the troublemakers show them a hero identification card from a special military operation. The police leave and come back the next morning to apologize soberly in order to document the fact that they apologized and came, but with no claims. Just in case, that's how it is. How many of ordinary soldiers, of mobilized soldiers, of volunteers, of PMC Wagner members have been to the war and have returned to the war and represent the danger to the Russian society? We didn't know. And Putin doesn't want us to know. As Evgeny Prigozhin said, that the level of crimes committed by PMC Wagners is extremely low and lower than it was before the start of the war, which is fun to hear. So it was me, Zach the Russian, on the Russian PTSD. I hope you find this video a little bit informative. If you want to support my channel and what I do, there's going to be a link in the description to Patreon and PayPal. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and see ya in the next ones. Bye.